In this video, I'm going to be bringing some Eldari over to Legions Imperialis and printing up this new little city as well. So let's get cracking. Now, this project's been a lot of fun because I really love epic scale minis. I just think they're so much fun to play with because you can get so many of them done in a really short period of time, and it just gives you much larger scale stuff to fight on. So all these tiles and stuff like that, you can basically get a city done really quickly, play in a small play space if you want to, or just have massive epic scale battles. So when I saw these miniatures by Edge Miniatures, I went wild for them and got a whole bunch of them. Now, this video is very kindly sponsored by PCBWay, and I'll have everything linked down below in the description for you. Now, they're a great company to have on hand if you don't have your own 3D printer, because they can do all the printing for you and get it sent out to your doorstep. So that way, if you want them either in resin, like these tiny little minis that I've got here, or if you want a whole bunch of like tiles or other city bits as well, you can get all those printed off in FDM and shipped right to your doorstep. More on them later though. So the first thing I needed to decide was what I was going to print. And like I mentioned, I found all of these by Edge Miniatures, and they are doing a whole bunch of like Legions Imperialis style stuff, but for Eldar. So that way we can add a few Xenos armies over to our Legions Imperialis or epic gaming that we want to do. Now, if you're concerned about the rule set you can play with as well, I'll have a really interesting rule set linked down below as well. Now, this looks crazy professional considering it's been done by a fan for the game. And basically, it has a whole bunch of Xenos armies and loads of different rule sets and units and everything else that you can use with Legions Imperialis rules. So that way, if you're into Legions Imperialis, you can do that. Otherwise, you can play it with your own rule system. So if you're using like Net Epic or something like that, you'll be able to do that too. So I downloaded a whole bunch of things by Edge Miniatures and I started printing them all off, and I sent them over to my new Hey Gears printer. And then I also backed this recently as well. So a little while ago, I saw this when I was doing one of my monthly wrap-ups for different creators on 3D printing files. And they were basically doing all of these different tiles. So there's loads of different like road tiles, different like city tiles, a canal tile as well with all these bridges, and then it's got a whole bunch of buildings. So I downloaded a whole bunch of these as well and threw them onto my Bamboo Lab printers and started getting printing. Once I had everything going, it was time to kind of figure out the tiles and everything else. And I've gone back and forth on these quite a few times, but for the most part, I've just airbrushed everything in black, got them all undercoated, and dry brushed in grey. It's nice, it's simple, and it's easy to do. I've spent more time on these terrain pieces than I have on pretty much anything else I've done in the past because I want them to stand out. So I've been picking out different details, like on the road, for example, there's a lot of gold on there, which kind of in my head made sense because it's the Imperium. They're probably gonna have some over the top like bits, which is always nice. And then I also went with, I don't know what effect this is. In my head, it was kind of like marble or moss, or it could be anything really. But basically, with the plain city tiles, I hit them all with black first, then with a lot of creams, and then with a lot of greens as well around the outside. And I think it just gives it a different vibe and a different color. And one thing you'll notice, like on the roof of this like library building that I've used, it's the same sort of theming as well. So I've used a lot of greens on there. And I just figured it's something a bit different rather than just having a big grey city. Just adds a flare of color in there. Now, the most fun bit was doing these canals. So to do those, basically, I did the same as everything else. So I sprayed them all black. But then before I moved on to any dry brushing stage and stuff like that, I hit them all with a really dark blue right down the middle of that river bit. And then a lighter blue just on the outside. And before I went on to any water effects or anything like that, actually, let it all dry, did my dry brushing for grey, but then I used like a cream dry brush just on the edges, right near like, I guess the banks of the canal. The canals have banks, I don't know, but where the shallow of the water would be in my head anyway. Now, once that was done, I went over with this AK interactive water effect, and I've never done anything where there's an edge where the stuff can run off before. I've always done like pools, and I did some pools a little while ago for my Blood Angels, and it failed massively because I hadn't like sealed it off properly. So for this, I used some masking tape just on the edge, and these are nice flat tiles. So in my head, it would work, but I wasn't sure when I pull it off, was it going to like make an absolute mess? So it was going to be a learning curve for me. So I masked them all off, and then I just dropped it in. Now you need to go slow with this, and from relatively high as well, I found, because otherwise you get a lot of bubbles in there. And don't go too deep. So for this, it's fine because we're using a really small scale thing, so it doesn't need to be massively deep. Pour it all in there. It says it sets in about 24 hours, which seems to be a downright lie in my opinion. It takes about 3 days for this to set. And then I was able to pull off the masking tape and it worked. And I've done, I think like 8 or 9 of these tiles so far, and I've had no leakages. So far, so good. And I love the way that looks. It just adds that nice reflective quality to it. And it does look like water running over the top of it. And it just completes that look of having like that dark blue in the middle, the lighter blues to the edge. and I think it looks pretty convincing, especially at a glance at this scale. I also did a couple of buildings as well, and did pretty much the exact same thing that I did with the tiles. So spray them all black and then dry brush them all with grey. Some areas got a dry brushing of cream as well. And then on the tops, I was using like a speed paint green just to kind of give it that same sort of effect. And I think it works quite well. It blends those buildings in with the same, whatever material this is, with the rest of them. But then onto the fun things, which are all of these Eldaris. And I love them. There's so many bits here. I've got this like Titan Walker. I've got these smaller Titans. I've got these airplanes as well. I've got all these tanks and grav tanks. I've got these speeder bikes, all these different infantry units. Not managed to get them all done. And I will be doing a follow-up video in the future where I try and do even more of those so I can have an absolutely massive battle. But I really like these. So painted these slightly different to the terrain, as you'd expect. Sprayed them all black first, and then white from above. So gave every single one a zenithal. Now, sometimes this is a bit of a waste when you're working with miniatures this scale, but I quite like doing it because then I use contrast paints afterwards to really get in there and not have to worry. I could have just airbrushed them all yellow, but I'm not a massive fan of airbrushing yellow. I always think it just looks too flat. That end effect, and that's probably because I'm not very good at doing it, but whenever I have airbrush yellow in the past, in my opinion, it just looks a little bit too flat and ends up looking like a toy. So with this, I did the zenithal prime, let it dry, and then went in there with some contrast paint. So I used Imperial Fist Yellow, which is a lovely yellow contrast paint, and sloshed it all over pretty much all of my miniatures. Once this was done, I picked out a couple of other details, and I figured for this, it was going to be yellow, red, and blue. That was going to be like the consistent theme throughout the whole army. At this scale, you don't need to go mad picking out all the different details. You can if you want, but I've always found that having at least 3 good standout colors in them, you have like your main color, which is the yellows, and then some different like accent colors. So for all the weapons, they've got these like blues, and then also some reds on like all the, I guess like the window pieces as well, and the domes of the helmets, and different areas on these models had some reds as well. And that just really helps to break up that massive flow of yellow that we would have had otherwise. For the bases, I just did them all black. And I know, again, some people will do some nice fancy bases, but I quite like doing them all black because it just helps the miniature to really stand out against everything else that's going on. After doing all of that, I was good to go and get them onto the table. And I'm going to be doing some Legions Imperialis this weekend as well with that rule set. And I'm really, really excited for it. I do really like these miniatures. Like I said, the by Edge miniatures, they're definitely well and worthwhile checking out. They're fantastic little beasties. And if you're into Legions Imperialis stuff or epic stuff, they're just great little proxies to have. I also really like all of these tiles, and I have everything linked down below as well. And like I mentioned at the start of the video, if you don't have your own 3D printer and you're just into Legions Imperialis or epic scale stuff and you want to get it ordered, then you'll be able to get any of these sets and then use something like PCBWay because they can do all the printing for you. So they can do printing in FDM, they can do printing in resin as well. So you just upload your files onto that, place your order, and then everything will get shipped to your doorstep. So you can't really go too far wrong. But then if you do have a 3D printer, which you can get these files yourself and just go crazy. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'm going to go and set these up on the gaming table, and I'll also be doing a follow-up video where I do some more stuff as well. This set has loads and loads of pieces for it, lots and lots of buildings, and I'm going to go wild. So hopefully I will see you in the next one. Ta-ra!